Hello, welcome guys. Welcome to Qualitative Research Design and Data Analysis, LSP510/03. So for today we'll go through Unit 1, Introduction to Qualitative Research in Psychology. So for this particular unit, we'll go through what is the nature of qualitative research design. Why it seems like it's quite stranger to you guys, where it's first time you actually heard of it, like what actually is it, why it remains hidden since it's not something that's quite new. So we'll actually go through some of the information here. So firstly, let's look at some quote that's related to qualitative research in psychology. So Smith 2015, we are witnessing an explosion of interest in qualitative psychology. This is a significant shift in a discipline which has had to emphasize the importance of quantitative psychology. Again, this is the reason why I mentioned a lot of you will be stranger to this, like for your degree in psychology or previously in other background, seems like quantitative research method is the only thing that you should be learning, or the things about statistics, SPSS, even if some of you learn JSP, seems like qualitative is out of the picture. So why the sudden interest now? Yeah. So similarly, by Josephson, 2014, qualitative inquiry has now been seated at the table of the discipline, representing perhaps again the paradigm shift, at least a pendulum swing within psychology, yeah, where they cannot say that there's more focus on qualitative research right now. It's more, there's gaining more interest, yeah, and perhaps becoming an equal counterparts to the quantitative research method, yeah. So I mentioned first question that a lot of you was like, why are we actually doing this? Is quantitative research not enough? The main reason, of course, is that qualitative research is gaining traction, as mentioned by both of the quote just now, and it is representing a major paradigm shift. Again, not to the idea where qualitative research the method is going to take over from quantitative research design. I imagine that it would almost never happen. It's just the fact that it's gaining more and more importance, and it becomes an alternative for researcher to actually explore instead of just quantitative research design. And most importantly, what I want you to take away from the whole course is the idea that it is good and worthy to learn this, not because like some of you would get the myth that qualitative research is easier because it's more flexible, no one can tell you that's wrong. Once you actually finish this course, you will know that that's not definitely the case. That's definitely not the case. Yeah. It's more that it does serve different purposes. So by learning both quantitative and qualitative research, you will become a more comprehensive researcher, so as a psychologist. Yeah. Okay, so it seems like okay, no questions that it is like quite important, given that a lot of people are now saying that it's essential, there's a paradigm shift and etc. But why now? Why suddenly actually the sudden popularity of the method itself? Well, apparently before this, there was quite a bit of obstacles to the promotion or the adaptation of qualitative research in psychology. So as we'll learn later, the main reason that is mainly cited behind the lack of promotions or application of qualitative research method in psychology is the basis of positivism in psychology. So positivism is a school of philosophy where the focus is on the search for universal law, yeah, using quantification. In this case, everything is becoming objective measure, as in numbers, and empirical investigation. That's the scientific experimentation methods that we all learn in research method papers during your degree years. Okay, so it is the main philosophical foundation of mainstream psychology even until today. Again, despite all the claims that it's a paradigm shift, etc., positivism is still more the popular and the main foundation. Yeah. So this is actually an attempt by psychologists in around 1890s plus to try to catch up to natural science like physics and biology by taking on the same philosophical background or philosophical view. Now, positivism itself tend to take a reductionist view of the universe, where the idea is that there are objective truth in the world, and by finding out the actual factors that's determining a certain thing. So for example, like H2O equals to water, yeah. So like water is being reduced into their molecule, which is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. That's it. That's the reductionist view. So similarly for psychology, Taking a reductionist view means that you find a reason or cause of particular behavior. You can boil it down to one to even several factors. That's it. So for example, like a lot of us would like to know this, isn't it? What is actually causing your interest in people, whether you are introvert or extrovert, yeah. So those things are quite reductionist if you think about it. You are trying to define someone by categorizing them into introvert versus extrovert, yeah. So what if someone is actually in the middle? Or more contemporary view is that people's personality, in this case, whether they are extrovert or introvert, would change depending on the context, yeah. So someone who is quite introvert in the natural in most setting, let it be when they are facing a strangers and etc., but when they are in a cosplay related event, let's say Comic Con, they might become extrovert, okay. So taking a reductionist view itself might not be most applicable idea all the time lah. Then again, that's the reason why qualitative research comes into mind, okay. Now, the adaptation of positivism in psychology is essential. It helps accelerate the expansion of psychology as a science. Like within 50 years, psychology has been catching up to mainstream sciences like physics and etc. Again, I imagine why this is one of the reasons why you guys are doing this, master. The fact that it is becoming something that's quite well known and people do find that it's interesting or important to know. Yeah. So the main questions we ask or asked by a lot of qualitative researchers is that, is it qualitative methods invariably incompatible with positivism? The quick answer is yes. As we will learn later, why is it so? Then does it actually matters or not? So apparently it does not actually matters. Yeah. So yes, they are incompatible, but it doesn't matter. It's actually a good thing that they are not the same thing and they actually serve different purposes. That's why by taking into account both, and it will be more comprehensive. Yeah. So as mentioned just now, qualitative research is not really something that's quite is new. It has been used even by pioneering psychologists. Like people, I imagine you will know the name of Maslow, yeah, who come up with the hierarchy of needs. Piaget, the main figure of developmental psychology, you know, where it discovered the stage of development, as well as Colbert, which is have to do with moral reasoning development in children. So all of them actually use the qualitative research if you think about it. Particularly like Maslow and Piaget did not actually run any experiment at all on their participant, yeah, including Colbert as well. So Colbert though somewhat interview, Piaget's and Maslow is most likely observation only, yeah. Where they actually look at how people behave, like Piaget, how his own children actually behave. That's how he come up with the whole theory itself. There's no quantification whatsoever, okay. So they has the qualitative research method has been used by really early and pioneering psychologists, but unfortunately, despite this, they are unable to fundamentally change the discipline of psychology, where you include quantitative research method as part of it, yeah, or acknowledge usage. Okay, comparing to others discipline, including social sciences, it takes psychology about 3 decades to actually catch up. So we are here only now. So the argument is that incorporating the qualitative method will only benefit the discipline. Definitely so. Again, they do serve different purposes, and by including that, you'll be able to cover things that is not really applicable if you are using a quantitative methods. Yeah. And do remember that this gives us idea that psychological research is not monolithic. It should not only be quantitative. It should not only about methods and numbers. Yeah, it should be about more. So comes to it, what is qualitative research? Now, even for qualitative research, the definition of qualitative research itself is quite challenging. As you will learn later, there are actually a lot of different methods, although we don't go through all of them lah. Okay, but if you actually go and dwell into it, or actually look at the recommended textbook, yeah, there is a lot of different methods, and all of them are actually quite heterogeneous, meaning that they are different, quite actually really different from each other. Yeah, some psychologists like Medal and Gong actually argue whether there's actually a need to define qualitative research as itself. But again, as you guys will already learn, having a general definition will definitely help with understanding lah. If not, it would just be like an ongoing ambiguity. People don't actually know what is it. I will ask you, okay, fine, you talk about qualitative research, but what it is? Yeah, without the ability to actually give some idea to people like students who are actually learning this, then it will be actually quite confusing. And that's why it's good to have some general characteristics that we will actually go through now. So some common features of qualitative research according to Denson and Lincoln are including this. So first of all, is concerned with the richness of description. This is first and foremost the most important characteristics of qualitative research, where in direct opposition to the reductionist view, yeah, this is a holistic view. So instead of simply asking people, tell me how happy you are today from 0 to 10, 0 is unhappy at all, 10 is extremely happy. So we boil down the whole human experience into a number. Yeah, here you actually ask people to tell you as much as they can, so you care about the elaboration and the amount of content that the participants are able to give you. That's the idea of richness of description. Yeah? So this is where instead of asking several simple questions and boiling it down into several options or answer, you actually ask the participant to elaborate. Please tell me more. Please tell me how do you feel today. Please tell me what makes you happy today, what makes you unhappy. Yeah, please elaborate more. That is the idea of richness of description. The reason why this is essential is that the qualitative research basically deal with derivation of meaning. So you extract or derive meaning from the descriptions that people tells you about a particular topic that you are studying. Yeah, the richer the data, the more information they tell you, the more likely is it that you are going to extract something that's meaningful. And hence that's why the reason that this is actually essential or important. Yeah, okay. And in consistent with what I mentioned just now, okay, qualitative research is interested in capturing the individual's perspective. So again, instead of focusing on comparison between individuals, between groups and etc., you focus on trying to know how the person actually interprets something or talk about something or understand something in much more detail. Yeah, again, you can see how the two is actually linked to each other here. Now, how imagine that you want to ask about person experience about, let's say, experience learning in Wawasan, Open University. Yeah, you can ask them quantitative data. I imagine that you guys have done student survey where ask you rate your satisfaction with your lecturer of the course, etc. Yeah, on 0 to 5, 0 being totally unsatisfied, 5 being extremely satisfied, something like that. Okay, but in this case, you don't just want that. You actually want the person to tell you about their own experience. Yeah, so that is the individual's perspective. And meaning is derived when multiple people or majority of people actually give you something that's quite similar. But you can see that even imagine a class of 10 to 20 students here, even if all of them are actually quite happy about their course or have a really positive experience with the course itself, how they tell you about it or what expect that they're happy about might be a bit different. Yeah, from there you might be able to derive things that is not possible if you just simply boil down things into numbers. Okay, so that's the reason why individual perspective is important, because in qualitative research you are allowing for the flexibility of data in order to have the possibility of discovering something that even the researcher did not notice or they have no idea that exists. Yeah, then this is one of the strengths of qualitative research, yeah, as we'll discuss later. Yeah, and the third feature is the rejection of positivism, as mentioned just now. Yes, it is incompatible. Positivism is the idea that the universe itself is objective and you are able to find out about the world through objective measures and empirical experimentations, and things can be boiled down to several factors and etc. Regarding what you're looking at. So qualitative research are totally against that idea lah, like saying that not that in all cases it's not possible, but they basically qualitative researchers say that it's not meaningful to do so. Like, what is the point of you doing it? Although quantitative research will tell you that okay, it allows us to control particular occurrence. So let's say that if I am able to find out what makes a student actually happy about Wawasan Open University, then I will be able to reproduce it. I will be able to make sure that all students are happy about it. Okay, But according to qualitative researcher, there's no point, given that different people might be happy about wawasan for different reasons, and given that there's so many things in the human experience, you are unable to cover everything objectively or boiling down into several factors. Yeah, okay, so that's the reason why they are incompatible. So next one is the adherence to postmodern sensibility. This one is a bit weird. Okay, postmodernism, in order to know what is it, first you need to know what is modernism. Modernism comes around with positivism, where it's the age of enlightenment, where scientists and educators and etc. are promoting the idea of reason and logic sense. Yeah, so everything is, and they boil down to empirical evidence, everything is objective, everything is logical, everything is about reasoning. Yeah, and postmodernism is the idea that there's no such thing. You should actually look at constructivism, or the reality is constructed by the person themselves. We will actually go through this in more detail later on. And that is postmodernism. Okay, so instead of looking into empiricism, which is promoted by modernism or positivism, you are supposed to be looking at postmodern sensibility. Yeah, so the idea is that you should take into account of different people having different experience, and that experience is essential and meaningful, because without it you won't be able to understand the world. So it's like you won't be able to have the total understanding of the world unless you take on the lenses of other people who are having and living the same experience or same period of time as well. Yeah, so only by taking into multiple accounts or multiple perspective of different people, then you're able to actually understand what the world is. Okay, and according to qualitative researcher, point number 5, quantitative research tends to ignore the constraint of everyday life. The easiest way to understand is that most quantitative research are being done in laboratory, where they are, I imagine the scientists are really proud about this. Of course, they are should be. Laboratory allows people to control for elements. Yeah, things like temperature, yeah, time of the day where the experiment is being done, the lightness level of the room and everything. So the control allow the scientists to derive findings with high internal validity, where they are able to establish causation. Yeah, so we would talk more about this when we go into quantitative research now, which is 511. Okay, but that's the idea. Like lab itself is definitely good. Again, remember psychologist was trying to chase over the natural science, like biology and physics. So lab is essential, where control is allowed, or you are able to exert control. Okay, but that, if you the qualitative researcher argue that there's no point of doing it, because you are looking at living human beings, not like molecule or chemistry structures or etc. So data or findings that you obtain from the lab, once you put it into real world, does it still make sense, or is it still applicable? That is the constraint of everyday life, because actual daily life is messy. There are a lot of things to take into account of. It's not simply like 1 or 2 hours in the lab where everything is under control, everything is clinical, everything is standardized. Okay, so in that sense, like, is there actually application of meaning of finding things through the lab or not? Yeah, that is the idea lah. So according to Denzel and Lincoln, again, qualitative research is to examine that by taking into account of different people experience. So you talk to different people about the topic of your interest, and the idea is that each person that you talk to would have a different life experience, and their life experience would become a lens of their experience, how they experience a particular phenomenon, and that allows you to examine the constraint of everyday life, or how life experience actually shape one's person experience, perception of things, you know, or how they experience it. So Bryman 2003 actually offer another set of how you actually the features of qualitative research that one can actually look at or refer to when you're trying to define qualitative research. So again, the first one is rich and deep data. Basically the same thing. Yeah, the data should be rich, as a lot of content, so that you are able to extract meaning from it. Then number 2 is interesting, which is not actually mentioned just now. Typically qualitative research are relatively unstructured. Okay, As we'll discuss later on, unstructured does not mean that you can just wing it. It's not like it's like, oh, it's a free world, you can do whatever you like. No, careful planning is still really essential. But then in comparison to quantitative experiment, especially one that's conducted in the lab, this is like a bit more flexible. You can even change the method of data collection in the middle if you think that is actually applicable, or actually the is emergent from the data. Yeah, the data inform you that now interview is not actually appropriate now, maybe focus group is better, then you're able to change it. You can add questions that's not even listed in an interview if you feel like it's actually essential or important. Yeah, so that's the idea of relativity and structured. Quantitative research, on the other hand, is quite rigorous. So once you determine the IV and DV, it's not like you can change it in the middle. Even instruction, everything measure have to be standardized, because that is the strength of quantitative research. Yeah, this is where they draw their high internal validity. So that's that. Again, it's not a strength or weaknesses thing. Okay, it's just that different type of research methods serve different purposes. Yeah, it's none of them are easier than the other one. So both of them have their own challenges. The key thing for you to think of, or at least I want you to know, hopefully you learn this once you've gone through both research related paper courses, is that they serve different purposes. So according to your research question, like say for your dissertation, you will be able to actually apply any of them, or even mix if you want to. All right. Now, in qualitative research, in regards to point three, researcher and participant tends to form a close relationship. Again, total opposition compared to quantitative research, where the researcher should be impartial, should be isolated or independent from the participant. Like online survey would be the best for them. Like it's anonymous. I don't need to contact the participants, so they avoid demand characteristics. They avoid biases. Yeah, but in this case, qualitative research, because you are trying to get rich and deep data from the participant itself, so there's a high chance that you will form a close relationship with the participant, especially in the type of research where you need to go into the community where you are interested in, like the participants, a community of participants that you're interested in. For example, there was one study that a person want to gauge the experience of women who are victims of domestic abuse. Yeah, she actually need to go to the halfway houses where victims are actually staying, and she spent about 6 to 9 months staying there before even starting the experiment, because she actually need to gain the trust of the victim, given that what she's going to ask or study is something that's quite sensitive and could be distressing for the participant. Yeah, so again, imagine victims of domestic abuse, and now you're going to interview them. If you're trying to go with this like quantitatively, it's really hard to make sure that they actually tells you the honest answer, or they will actually provide you a lot of information. Okay, and that's the reason why close relationship in this case is essential. Okay, an insider perspective is similar to what is mentioned just now, is the individual perspective. Yeah, no different here. Again, the same reason why it's important. Now, number five is a bit weird. Now, according to Bryman, qualitative research is not about theory testing, but there is a particular method of qualitative research that is about qualitative the theory testing, which is grounded theory research. Yeah, but this is not really covered in our unit lah, so we'll just let it be for now. For those who are more interested, can actually read more on it, or actually just ask me about it. Okay, but theory research is about one of the most complex type of qualitative research you can go for. Like, again, you are doing theory testing, but you are doing it qualitatively instead of quantitatively. Yeah. So number six is linked to number four, which is the individual perspective. But this is more to the idea that you want to look at the individual as an individual. So you don't try to draw similarity or just contrast between people, but you want to focus on the individuals and themselves, either he or she lah, yeah, and actually look at the experience through their lenses, again his or her lenses, yeah, by focusing on that person only. Okay, and lastly, for qualitative researcher, the reality is constructed socially, so it's called like social reality lah. We'll actually go more into this when we talk about social constructivism. Yeah. So this figure is actually shared in your unit to just give you a comprehensive idea of what is the major characteristics of qualitative research. Yeah, all of these things that we already mentioned, so we won't need to actually go through them again. Now, going back to the idea of science, remember just now, like we talked about science and how it actually becomes the basis of psychology. So science, the word "saya" comes from to know. So it gives rise to the scientific method we know of lah. Again, the positivism actually established the whole quantitative research method as the basis of psychology today. Okay, so even according to the British Psychological Society, yeah, psychology is the scientific study of the mind. So again, the scientific study of the mind, yeah, okay, and how it dictates and influences our behavior from communication and memory to thoughts and emotion. So again, remember this is a scientific study. So it is a big deal for psychologists. I tell you, like, where we argue psychology as a science, and as later we show, like what gives rise to psychology as a science is quantitative research method and statistics, because the definition of science, even until now, when people will look at natural science like biology, chemistry, what makes them science. So again, in order for psychology to be qualified in the same category, we basically have to follow the same criteria lah. That's why so the similar to the natural sciences, we are going to the route of science defined by positivism. Yeah. Again, according to positivism, all beings in the universe except human being, both animate and inanimate, are seen as objective, real, and exist independently of human being. So meaning that they don't actually need our experience to live. They are what they are. Again, animate or inanimate. Okay, even your pet lah, your house, those things exist because they are real. They are objective. You can see them, you can measure them, etc. Now, the idea of human agency, where we have free will, etc., is just incidental. So basically, everything happens in your life, uh, coincidence that's already predetermined, because the universe already have things going on. All the factors that's happening in your life would determines what is going on happen tomorrow in your life. Yeah, that you actually have no choice. That's the idea, and you are able to study what the real reality of the world is by using science or experimentation, and it should be indisputable, meaning that it is what it is because it's objective truth. Yeah, it's like male is male, female is female. There's no in between. Okay, so that is the idea. Okay, and science evolved into a set of comprehensive methodology and procedure where you would use those as a tools in order to find out what's the reality about the world. Okay, and in psychology particularly, you're focusing on activities that are individualistic and mentalistic, in like cognitive and behavior lah. Okay, that is the science, as particularly in terms of psychology, that is defined by positivism. Now, all this point is refuted by qualitative researcher. No surprises there. According to qualitative researcher, one is never able to directly observe the real universe. There's a saying that even the color or experience of color is different. Like you are looking at me wearing a red shirt. If you ask any psychologist who study sensational perception, the red that you see and the red that I see is actually different, although we define it or categorize them as the same thing. That's why they exist where there are some colors that people can differentiate and people cannot, like a different shade of blues and stuff. Yeah, so the experience or perception of color is already different. So in saying that there's a real universe, there's no such thing. Okay, but you can use scientific methods in order to impose a subjective view of the universe. Again, remember, red is even different for all of us. So even red or experience of a color of red is subjective, but you are able to actually gauge the subjective view of the universe using scientific method. Okay, but because of that, there are little consensus over what is the correct method. Remember just now, defining qualitative research already complex. So saying that there's actually a set of standardized method is out of the question. There's no such thing, yeah, particularly for qualitative research design. Okay, and part of the pursuit of understanding the universe should be gone collectively and socially. So collectively, like include as much as people possible and get a comprehensive view. Socially is my you get the data through conversation, like spoken language, like how people actually tells you about the universe and stuff. And from here you will see one of the key thing is that you basically can only conduct qualitative research with human being, where language is possible. Yeah, all other beings, unfortunately, there's no spoken language per se. Yeah. Now, something before we proceed is that it's essential to actually differentiate between two things, qualitative data collection and qualitative data analysis. So data collections, something that begin early in psychology. Yeah, things we talk about observations, interview, even including focus group. Yeah, those things have been used like really early, and even quantitative researchers are actually okay with it. Like they do use interviews and etc. Yeah. But qualitative data analysis, on the other hand, is much slower in application. Okay, it started applying in social sciences in the field like sociology, yeah, then marketing, etc. Only like 1960 onwards. We'll actually go through the history briefly later. Okay, they are called by early scientists to say that you should utilize it in the psychology, but it's not really adapted until now, yeah, in the year 2000 plus. Okay, example like grounded theory. This is one that I mentioned where there's theory testing using qualitative methods. There will be thematic analysis that we'll actually talk about later in Unit 4. Okay, then now is qualitative data analysis, particularly in psychology. Okay, increasingly common since the 1980s, but there is a rise in calling for incorporating both lah. So for now, training for both method is actually recommended, and that's the reason why you are here. So it's like some contemporary top methods like discourse analysis, where you, instead of just simply looking at what people say, you want to look at the interaction between people and study how it unravel, like how one thing lead to another, what actually causes silence, what does a silent mean when you actually have a conversation, all those things. Yeah. Now, in opposition of positivism, there's a social constructivism. So this is lying with the rise of postmodernism lah. As we mentioned just now, the postmodernism is the idea that you should focus on the experience of the person, yeah, not like logical sense or objective measure. So the belief is that knowledge is sustained by the social process. So the reality of the universe is basically being constructed through daily conversation. So you will only understand how someone see the world, what is the reality of the world, by talking to them. Yeah. And one thing to actually support that is that there's historical and cultural specificity of language. So language would change depending on the cultural background and the historical context that you are in at the particular time. Okay, for example, perception of homosexuality. Now, even DSM, yeah, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorder, yeah, for diagnostic lah, 1 and 2 actually see homosexuality as a mental disorder, where conversion therapy should be applied in order to help people to convert back into a normal sexual orientation. Yeah, but since the version number 3, homosexuality, is more well accepted. If you think about nowadays, there are widespread protests, or people actually more progressive and accept the idea that this is natural, yeah, or this should be something that is acceptable lah, as long as it doesn't actually affect your life. Like why you should actually bother other people's sexual orientation, yeah. And you can see the language around it would actually change depending on where you are at the historical context. Okay, so social constructivism take a really critical stand on the taken for granted knowledge. The idea taken for granted knowledge refers to the objective truth as proposed by positivism lah. Like all the knowledge is already there, you just need to discover it through scientific method. And the qualitative researchers seriously don't like it, or proponent of social constructivism seriously don't like it. Like you are just taking for granted, like is there I think it should not be. Yeah, like for example, an organism are really objective or rational. Like human, are we actually rational? And modernism says that you should focus on reasons and logics, right? But we are not logical. Humans are not rational. So there's no such thing as an objective truth. The only way you can find out the truth is by asking people, engage them in a conversation, to gauge what is the subjective version of the truth or subjective version of the reality through their speech. Okay, and according to social constructivists, knowledge and social actions are integrated or supposed to be integrated, meaning that if you find that there are social injustice, then you should act on it. So if you talk to people who are victims of domestic abuse, yeah, they would talk about how their experience is traumatizing, how they are being victimized. So if you do find there's this case, then you should advocate for them, yeah. Or you talk to people who are victim of racism, yeah. And once you have findings to support that there is such a thing as racism, then you should advocate for the victim of racism, where you need to fight for equality, etc. And according to again social constructiveness, this is largely ignored in quantitative research or positivism. Yeah, it's like, well, I just want to find out the truth. Everything else is not my concern. But social justice is a key thing for qualitative researcher, because their philosophy is social constructivism. Yeah. Now, there are two broad types of social constructivism. Now, this is just more basically for you to think of and know. It's not really essential for research per se. One is interactionally focused. This is more micro or light level, meaning that you focus on the individual. Yeah, like individual participant actively contributes in or terms of the construction of the social reality via their daily conversation, either with others or with the researcher. Yeah. So this is the foundation to methods like discourse analysis and conversational analysis, where you are focusing on the conversation or the interaction, yeah, in terms of using human language. Okay. The second type is societally focused. This is on more a macro level, and it's called dark social constructivism, because the focus now, instead on individual experience, is on the social power or the social power structure. Okay. So this derived from a larger aspect of life, like institutional practice or the social structures or social inequality. Remember, we talk about social constructivism as social justice is a key thing. Yeah. Now, according to this particular view, participants are overpowered by the power structure of the society, meaning that all of us have relatively powerless to produce social changes. And but again, that's the reason why it's important to know more about this. Like again, if we do know that there is social inequality and there's abuse or overwhelming social power to try to stop it, then the more we need to actually advocate for equality etc. Okay. Now, the discussion on the slides previously give you a general idea what is qualitative research, what is the obstacles that are behind it, the comparison between positivism versus social constructivism, where there's basically a rivalry going on. Okay, now what about people who have learned about qualitative research or even apply qualitative research method, all the academics and students, as we'll show later on when we talk about development of qualitative research. This is training in qualitative research is now quite common for students of social sciences, including psychology. Yeah. So for those of the psychology student or academics who have used the method, what do they think about qualitative research itself? Let's actually go through this, and maybe once you are introduced more into the method, you can see whether this fit with your idea or perception of qualitative method or not. Yeah. So firstly, it's a lack of exposure and confidence. This means that despite the higher or more availability of training opportunities or informations, yeah, or even some cases they're forced to actually do it. Like in UK now, training in qualitative research is a must thing. Like as you guys now you are actually have to do this no longer, where quantitative research is sufficient. Okay, they still feel like there's a lack of exposure. Yeah, I remember as we mentioned just now, like during undergraduate, it's still something that's quite rare. You actually need to introduce to this, and because of that, they don't have much confidence. Remember, this is both for academic and students. So even for academics, they feel like they do not accept a lot of training in this. For the, to be honest, like even for me, I'm not well trained in all the different methods. Like there's so many of them, and each of them are really different. So in that case, lack of confidence in, if you think about the whole thing, is actually quite a common theme. And it's actually time and resource intensive. This one is for those of you who hear from other researchers that, oh, qualitative is easy to do one. It's much easier than the SPSS. Yeah, you don't actually need to spend a lot of time and effort doing it. I will tell you now that is a total lie. Do not treat it as a simple thing lah. Again, like as you see here, even for people who train it, do it before, it's time and resources intensive. Okay. When if you are engaging each other when it comes to dissertation, I tell you more lah. But basically, quantitative research would take a more time when you are deciding what to do because it's more rigorous, and data collection will take a bit more time given that it requires a larger sample size, something that we'll talk about in Unit 2. But quantitative research is easier on the these two steps because it's more flexible. But when it comes to data analysis, it will take you much more time to do. Yeah, again, you learn this in Unit 4 lah, yeah. But they do agree that it's inherent to psychology, so it's supposed to be there. Yeah, you are supposed to learn it, so it is supposed to belong in psychology syllabus as well. And it's good that it's capturing the life experience. Yeah, so it was much more flexible. It gives you a clearer, more comprehensive picture of what you're actually studying. Okay, and the power between participant and researcher is much less. The distances is much smaller. Yeah, there's not much power distance between the two. In quantitative research, typically the researcher will hold the power. Basically, I decide what to do will happen. I decide on the procedure. I decide what you are going to be exposed to. A participant do have a choice of whether they want to participate or not, but once they have agreed, then the only right they have is to withdraw, including withdrawing the data lah. But whatever that happens in the experiment is out of their hand. They are not able to control it. On the other hand, in qualitative research, the participant take a much more active role. Like if you ask them a question, they can simply say, I don't want to answer you, yeah, or they will detect the direction of the research or where it's going, yeah, instead of the researcher itself. Okay, and in qualitative research, there are higher level of respect as well as a legitimacy to the participants. Yeah, so participants' own experience giving much more legitimacy because the researcher want to know more. They will acknowledge the differences. They want to acknowledge the personal experience. Yeah, and through the process of doing that, it seems like they are paying much more respect towards the participant. Yeah. Okay, but in saying that, the findings that qualitative research generate tends to be subjective, and there's lack of rigorous. Again, the idea that, oh, qualitative research is supposed to be flexible, because of that it does not actually have the scientific rigorous that you require to generate research that will allow you to say imply causation, which is a fair criticism. And given that there's no wrong answer in qualitative research, one of the main reason why it seems like a lot of people today likes it, like no one can tell me that I'm wrong. So it's not like you can tell me that I'm supposed to run an ANOVA, not a t-test. No, you cannot tell me that it's wrong, because it's whatever that I interpret it to be. Not, to be honest, not that simple, but it does have that understanding when people are applying it. Okay, and because of the subjectivity, generalizability tends to be quite limited. Like you are focusing on the personal experience of few people that you put a lot of effort into going into detail, but because of that you cannot say that, or do not expect that your data will be applied to other people as well in the population. Yeah, and because of that, the findings could have a lower worth. Like you see, you cannot apply to the wider generation or population, then what's the point? So it's much like you are interviewing the person to write a bibliography, is it? Then what the findings, what is the worth of the finding itself? But as you will learn later on, the main reason why, for me personally, that you will still want to learn qualitative research is that it is something that's good to apply when you don't actually have a clear idea about the phenomenon that you are testing. It gives you an anchor point to see how you want to proceed with your quantitative research that would have a higher generalizability and validity. Yeah. Okay, so that's why it's still essential. Okay, now in terms of qualitative research, now people do agree on their general characteristics. The negative is that it seems like they believe that they lack in statistics skills. That's why they want to do this. Like, oh, you want to do this simply because you're not good at statistics. You just want to run away from stats. Yeah. But the positive is that they give them a feeling of they are more a human being. they are being an actual person, compared to quantitative researcher. They seems to be quite clinical and like a robot. Yeah, everything is rigorous, everything is fixed. Yeah, they do seem like more a person. Okay, so that's the perception of student and academics on qualitative research and qualitative researcher. Okay, now let's talk a bit about the qualitative revolution in the logy. Again, qualitative research is not just the lack of statistics and numbers, or despite the experience or the report I just now lah. But it's still important to distinguish between qualitative data collection and analysis, as mentioned just now. Okay, collection has been used quite a long time ago and is continued to be applied, but they do not recognize it as a qualitative research because the analysis part actually comes in much later. Now, 18th century is the beginning of enlightenment, where positivism is born, yeah, and it becomes a dominating perspective of psychology, because again we are trying to catch up to natural science at that time. Then in 1970s, the first psychology lab is being built by William James and Wilhelm Wundt. Now, Wilhelm Wundt seems like he developed the lab a bit later, but he's the one who actually started the whole experimenting. That's why he's called the father of modern psychology. Yeah, so they do both of this propel the focus on laboratory research. Remember, because they established the first lab, and that becomes supporting experimentation, which is in line with positivism. Yeah, and it remains the main focus until today, not just for the 20th century. Still today, quantitative is more popular. And then 1890s, there's a bloom of statistical analysis method that would give rise to the support of the idea that psychology is a science. So previously, people would still argue that psychology is not a science because it's not measuring something that's objective. You are unable to derive an objective truth. And with the rise of statistics, you are able to do so. And that's the reason why you basically highly encourage to learn about statistics when you are studying psychology. Yeah, and then after the Second World War, APA is actually established, and you can see that it blooms really fast. People actually taking up the membership quite fast, and etc. And the professional psychologists at the time is to consider those who are well trained in quantitative methods. Again, you can see until now, yeah, from the 18th century to 19,000, still talking about quantitative, still talking about positivism. The qualitative side is like totally gone, not there. Then logical positivism is establishing just a particular school. So this is where the peak of modernism. We will come up with logical positivism. Yeah? Okay, but at the same time, the qualitative research method is being applied. Yeah, technique of immersions and involvement. Okay, Malinowski begins cross-cultural study, but is in anthropology. Though his method is known as ethnography nowadays, where you actually study things that have to do with culture, and typically you immerse yourself in the particular culture, and through observation and interview and trying to discover the reality, or what is the informations or regarding a particular culture at the time. But this is something that are quite use of quantitative research method here, qualitative research method here, but again is in anthropology. In 1930s, more and more psychologists now are trained in statistical method. Remember, like previously, it's spelled as the standard of a professionally trained psychologist. Okay, but the first psychology ethnographic study that is widely published is being done at a similar timeline, Marianto study. Okay, is talking about experience of unemployed in Austria, where there was a mixture There are still quantitative data collection, but they actually incorporate some qualitative methods in, as in participant observations, try to see how unemployment actually affected their life, and etc. Okay, so this is the first ever breakthrough in quantitative research in psychology. So you have 18th centuries and 1930s only, then you have the first one. Then research in media study lead to development of content analysis, which is the first widely accepted qualitative data analysis method, where you are analyzing the qualitative data using a quantitative manner. So content analysis, in short is like a frequency analysis. You would establish what is the key word that you want to look at, or they call it code and then you basically count how many times that word actually turns up. and the more frequent the words is mentioned, the more important it is. That was the idea of content analysis, and like it's just the simplest form. Okay, and Lazarsfeld actually published the first study that employed focus group to collect data. Yeah, so there's the data collection methods. New one, a focus group. We will talk more about focus group in Unit 3. So in 1950s, there's cognitivism. Actually, it started as the opposition of behaviorism, but still cognitivism is still focusing on quantitative methods. It's trying to quantify the mind, basically, like what is happening in your mind. You put it onto numbers through psychometric measure mainly lah. Okay, then the psychology of personal construct is published. Like this is a good thing for qualitative research because it's about constructivism. Yeah, so idea is that you do construct your own personal reality that was linked to your personality. Yeah, then sociologists are starting to use ethno methodology, so ethnography lah, that one we actually mentioned just now, to study culture, etc. And this is the most influential precursor of conversation analysis, where people are actually analyzing conversation, yeah, not just like spoken language and etc. But now is how conversation is actually engaged, how it happens, how it unravel. Then in 1960, social constructivism began to gain traction. Yeah. So one of the things that comes up is the discovery of grounded theory. Remember, this is where a quantitative method is used in order to test a particular theory. Yeah? Then conversation analysis become more popular after it's actually developed by Harvey Sachs. So first publication is around 1968. So again, conversation analysis becoming more and more popular, meaning that the quantitative data analysis method is becoming more popular. It also give rise to discourse analysis, which is a deeper analysis of conversation. Things that is not really on the surface level, but more deeply embedded in the whole conversation taking place. And similarly, in 1960, the researcher established the first school of nemological research. So nemological research is the most common type of qualitative research that we know of today, where you focus on individual experiences. Then feminism beginning to take root in psychology, where it also gives another push for qualitative research now, because it's more about social constructivism in order to understand how women was actually being discriminated against in the field of academic at that time. Yeah, so you actually use qualitative research methods or a research approach in order to understand their experience more. Yeah, then again, further development into the discourse analysis. Then we come to 1980s, where the Foucauldian ideas is being introduced in psychology. Foucauldian, in comparison to other methods, tend to focus more on social power. This is the dark approach that we talked about just now, or the macro approach, where you focus on the social power, how it actually change a person's life or their experience, etc. Yeah. Then the first book that is published on qualitative research, Discourse and Social Psychology, was published by Jonathan Porter and Margaret Witterow in 1987, where it's basically acknowledging the contribution of qualitative research design or research method. Yeah. And it comes to 1990s, which is more current, contemporary now. You have Foucauldian discourse analysis, still focusing on how conversation actually unravel, etc. That's discourse analysis. But now, instead of focusing on human experience or personal experience, you focus more on the social power side of it. The first paper on interpretive phenomenological analysis was published. The IPA is all about individual experience, like how someone actually experienced particular phenomenon or their life experience, yeah, and how actually aid you or help you to understand the topic of interest that you are studying at that time. Then the British Psychological Society established a qualitative method section. So you see, APA establishment of APA was a major move behind the quantitative side of psychology. So same here, when a professional body actually establish a particular section, is giving acknowledgement towards the importance of the particular method here. Okay, so a similar attempt was trying to done in APA in 2008, but it fails at that time. So it is quite a big deal for qualitative researcher in psychology, where it start to get official recognition at the time. Yeah, and now training in both quantitative and qualitative methods is becoming more and more common. So firstly, in 2000s, early 2000s, it's just for doctoral student, but now you can see that even in Malaysia, it's an essential thing for master level student already. Yeah? Okay. And we are now where journals specialized in qualitative methods are actually established already. Again, further acknowledgement that qualitative research is a main part of contemporary psychology. It's not something that you should ignore, and you should acknowledge it, and it should be studied separately from the quantitative arm of psychology. Yeah, so you are able to, again, it's good that they are different from each other. The idea that you are able to use them to cover a larger field, and you should choose the method that fits your research question at that time. And yeah, in order, then you becomes a more comprehensive researcher in that sense. And psychology would be, as psychologists, you'll be able to understand more about the world by using different methods. Yeah, and that would be the end of the class. Okay, I hope you have fun learning about qualitative research. Yeah? I will see you in unit 2.